Good evening, good evening. The Board of Trustees of the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District is now convened in a committee of the whole meeting on Monday, May 14th, 2018, the Monday after Mother's Day, in the boardroom of the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Instructional Support Center, 10300 Jones Road, Houston, Texas, 6 p.m. for the purpose of reviewing that portion of the Thursday, May 17, 2018 school board agenda designated as action items and to hear designated reports and recognitions posted in the meeting notice as required by Texas law. No action will be taken at this meeting. I want to welcome members of our audience and our television viewers to this meeting of the Board of Trustees. As the Cypress-Fairbanks Board of Trustees, we are here to set goals, listen to reports, approve budgets, contracts, personnel appointments, and make policy for the district. It is not the role of the board to make day-to-day operational decisions. The management and day-to-day operations of the district are the responsibility of the superintendent. We have policies and procedures in place to resolve concerns and issues. This is a public meeting of the Board of Trustees and not a meeting of the public. Prior to this meeting, board members received information related to items on tonight's agenda. Agenda items will not necessarily be handled in the order listed on the notice. The meeting is open to all who wish to attend and hear the matters discussed. During the course of this meeting, the board may determine that a closed session is necessary. In that event, the board will meet in closed session to consider matters duly posted for this meeting as permitted by sections 551.071 and 551.084 of the Texas Government Code. These proceedings are airing live on CFTV Channel 16 and CFTV Online on the district website. They will also be rebroadcast throughout the month on Channel 16 and available as video on demand on the website. For the tape to adequately reflect the proceedings, I respectfully ask that you please refrain from talking while others are speaking and that cell phones are turned off or in silent mode. Thank you for taking time to join us this evening and for your interest in the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District. I would like to also take this opportunity to recognize I don't think we have any community leadership members tonight. So we'll go to our reports section. The board will hear the following reports on 4A. The administration will provide a written report on the status of the 2018-2019 budget process. Presenter Stuart Snow. And 4B, the administration will provide an oral report on the preliminary budget for 2018-2019 school year. And this we will have tonight. Stuart Snow.
Thank you, President Ogletree, members of the board, and Dr. Henry. Recall that I sent you a letter early in April describing the district's continuing budget challenges. Also, that letter is included in this meeting's agenda under written reports that you just referred to. I want to take some time to report to you the status of the general operating budget preparation process for the 2018-2019 fiscal year. Certainly the current year has been unusual and especially difficult for our community staff and students with the devastating effects of flooding from Hurricane Harvey and the snow days and the resulting loss of instructional days from each of those occurrences. There are a number of factors that that are influencing the budget process this year, and in a few minutes I will present a slide that shows our state revenue declining every year due to increases in our taxable property values. The values assigned by the Controller's Property Tax Division are the values used in factoring in the amount of our state revenue. These values are historically higher than the same properties appraised by the Harris County Appraisal District, which determine our tax levy and resulting tax revenue. And as you know, as the controller's values, assigned values increase at a greater rate, as the controller's assigned values rise, our state revenue that we receive declines by almost an equal amount. And if the controller's assigned values are increasing at a greater rate than the values appraised by Harris County, then our tax revenue is not able to offset the loss of state revenue. In addition, the economic impact of Hurricane Harvey is essentially unknown at this time. We have really no real data supporting the impact that Hurricane Harvey will have on our property values. And we know that our property insurance premiums are expected to increase primarily due to that occurrence. Also, as you can see on the slide, our values have not fully recovered from the economic downturn that we experienced in 2015, as well as the declining oil prices in 2016. And I have a slide a little bit later in the presentation to indicate that. And then another issue that we are factoring into the budget process is the increase that has been announced by TRS Active Care in our employee health insurance premiums. So for 2018-19, our budget priorities are, first, not allow any lingering effect on our school families and employees due to the natural occurrences to impair our ability to provide the highest quality of instruction and services. And we also strive every year to remain competitive with our compensation plan. In addition, we have increased awareness this year and priority on the safety of our students and employees, and you'll see some figures that support that. And then again, we strive to always ensure that we are protecting our district's facilities and infrastructure. Taxable property value certified by the Harris County Appraisal District is the basis for our tax revenue. And on this slide, you can see that for 2013-14 budget year, our taxable values were $34 billion, or an increase of 9.67% over the previous tax year. Our taxable values for the next year, 2014-15, increased 16.9% from the previous year. And then beginning in 2015-16, the rate of our value increases declined each of the next 3 years. For 2018-19, we are projecting our taxable values to be $52.2 billion, or an increase of about 4%, which is about the same rate of increase as we saw in the current year in 2017-18. Hopefully, this is a slight upward trend that will continue for the next several years. We're anxious to see how that will play out. But for comparison purposes, and you don't have this on the slide, but for comparison purposes, the controller's assigned values are increasing at a greater rate. In fact, the legislative appropriations are factoring in a 7.04% value increase in tax year 2017 and 6.77% in tax year 2018. Now let's look at our student enrollment that forms the basis of our state revenue. You can see that we continue to hover around a student growth rate of about 1% per year. Although we no longer have the extreme challenges of a fast growth school district, we're still adding well over 1,000 students per year. This is the slide I was referring to earlier. This slide shows the changes per year in both state revenue and tax revenue. And you can see that our audited state revenues, and these are audited figures for from 14-15 through 16-17 with a projected 17-18 and 18-19. But you can see that in 2014-15, our audited state revenue was $393.7 million, and it declined to $355.2 million in 2015-16, and continued to decline each year to our projected state revenue in 2018-19 of $313.3 million. Over that 4-year period of time, our state revenue has declined over $80 million, a drop of almost 20.5%. And in 2014-15, state revenue comprised nearly 49% of our total operating revenue. In 2018-19, state revenue will make up just 37% of our total revenue, and I have a slide to show you that as well. Looking at the tax revenue in 2014-15, our tax revenue was $415.8 million, or 51% of our total operating revenues. The amount of tax revenue increases each year thereafter to our projected tax collections of $515.7 million in 2018-19, or representing 62% of the total. So over the same 4-year period of time, tax revenue has increased $99.8 million, or 24%, which is putting more of a burden on our taxpayers to fund public education. And you can see that our student enrollment continues to increase each year. Since 2014-15, we have added over 4,700 students, or a growth rate of 4.19%. But the thing I want you to focus on, besides the continual decline in our state revenue, despite our increases in student population, is the net increase in total revenue. I want you to focus on that. Since 2014-15, our total operating revenue has increased only $19 million, or just 2.4%. And if you average that total increase over a 4-year period, our total operating revenue is increasing only $4.8 million per year, while adding an average of nearly 1,200 students per year, and having to offer competitive salaries to our teachers and other employees, as well as inflationary cost increases of district operations. This slide shows the same state and tax revenue you saw in the previous slide, except on a per student basis. And the changes are even more pronounced on this slide. Since 2014-15, our state revenue has declined by $823 per student, or 23.62%, whereas our tax revenue has increased only $700 per student, or 19%. So instead of our total operating revenues increasing slightly over that 4-year period of time, as you saw in the previous slide, on a per student basis, total revenue has actually declined $123 per student since 2014-15, even though, again, we have added over 4,700 students during that time. So our total revenue is not providing the funds to support our growing student population, and the state is not funding our student growth, and the tax revenue is not adequately offsetting the loss of our state funding. The next slide shows what the previous 2 slides depict in terms of the continuing decline in state operating revenues and the increasing burden on our taxpayers. And you can see that these are audited figures for 2014-15 through 16-17, and are projected 17-18 and 18-19. But in 2014, this is straight from our comprehensive annual financial report, state revenue represented 48.6% of our total operating revenue, while tax revenue represented 51.4%. And you can see that that state revenue is decreasing every single year since then until 2018-19. We're projecting that our total state revenue for operations will only represent 37.7% of our total revenue, and tax revenue will be 62.3% of our operating revenues. This is a familiar slide. You've seen this every year. We try to show this to you to see how we compare, how we stack up with our neighboring school districts with teacher salaries. The districts shown here, again, are those that we primarily compete with for teachers, and the information shown on this slide was taken from the 2017 salary survey that was conducted by the Texas Association of School Boards. And as you look at the slide, the salaries for Cy-Fair are shown in the blue background, and Cy-Fair's ranking relative to the other 7 districts is listed. The other 7 districts listed is shown in the parentheses beside the respective salary. And so for the current year, 2017-18, Tomball ISD has the highest starting teacher salary at $53,200. We are second at $53,000 even. $200 less. We are the highest salary at every 5-year level increment, except at the maximum schedule, where we are second. As I mentioned, this year has been a very difficult one for many of our employees, as many of them have suffered devastating losses of their homes and cars and their entire possessions, really. We have employees that are still not yet able to get back into their homes because of the flooding. In addition, the employees participating in our TRS Active Care health insurance plan will be experiencing an increase in their premiums. Even those employees not participating in our health plan, but are covered under another health plan, such as their spouse's health plan, are likely to experience insurance premiums as well, increases as well. So if we can do nothing else, we need to take care of our employee families. Unless the legislature provides some funding relief and without exercising some of the options that I will show you in a few minutes, we may not be able to provide a raise in 2019-20. And so our preliminary plan for the 2018-19 budget is in keeping with the budget priorities that I spoke of earlier, and they are that we offer a starting teacher salary of $54,000, which is $1,000 more than this year. Provide a salary increase of 3% for all teachers at each step on the hiring schedule. The amount of the increase for teachers range from $1,590 to $2,479, with an average increase of $2,020 across all steps of the hiring schedule. Provide a salary increase of 3% of the greater of midpoint or base salary for all other employees. We're proposing a funding for an increase of $2 in the daily rate paid to our substitute teachers and substitute paraprofessionals. We're providing in this budget additional funding to the police department for 6 additional police officers, 2 dispatchers, a security systems specialist, a records clerk, and 2 drug and weapons canines. Funding for ongoing software licenses and maintenance is included, also including funding for an expected increase in our property insurance that I mentioned earlier, and then funding for our music uniform rotation schedule. Since we have been reassigned or realigned into 2 UIL districts, we will be incurring some additional costs for travel and et cetera, those types of things. So we've got some money in there to be able to cover that. And then we're providing funding necessary to accommodate the additional grade levels that are at Bridgeland and Cy Park High Schools. And so the preliminary cost of the additional budget items listed on the previous slide The total addition, the cost for the teacher salary increase is $13.8 million. The price tag for the salary increase for all other employees is $7.4 million. New teachers, we have some money in there for new teachers that are required for enrollment growth, and that's $4 million. The additional police department expenditures represent $500,000. UIL realignment is $600,000, and then we've included $1.5 million for software licenses and the increase in our property insurance premiums. And then we have some other miscellaneous costs that are included in the budget proposal of $4.3 million. So the total budget additions to the budget amount to $32.1 million. However, to help offset a great portion of the additions, which are made up mostly of salary increases, and in order to be able to help pay for these salary increases, we have over the course of the budget process identified certain areas where we can cut or save $21.7 million from the current budget through departmental cuts, position cuts through attrition, or renegotiated contracts. And so our preliminary budget amounts to an increase of $10.4 million over the current year, or just a 1.1% increase. Recall that in the current year budget, 2017-18, we adopted an $18 million budget deficit with revenues of $902.2 million and expenditures of $920 million. For 18-19, total estimated revenues are $891 million, which is $11 million less than in 2017-18. And our preliminary expenditures of $931 million are $10.4 million more than this year, so representing an increase over the current year of 1.1%. When I testified before the Texas Commission on School Finance, I explained that there were very few options for us available to meet the ongoing budget challenges that we are and will be facing in the future. And they are, what I testified to that commission was our options are a tax ratification election to increase our M&O tax rate by 13 cents up to the maximum of $1.17. Eliminate the 20% local optional homestead exemption if the prohibition is repealed. Currently in statute, we are prohibited from changing or repealing our local optional homestead, our 20% optional homestead exemption until December 31st of 2019. So depending upon what the legislature does in the next session, we suspect, I guess, that they would continue to keep that statute in there and I guess forward the date so that we would still be prohibited from being able to touch that homestead exemption. The third item is option that we have is that we could implement additional budget reductions in the elimination of hundreds of positions, and you recall that's what we did several years ago over about a 4-year period of time. Certainly, we are trying to avoid that, or to continue to draw down our operating fund balance, which is not sustainable over time, obviously. The one option I will explain to you tonight that I did not speak to in my testimony is a 2-cent tax swap. And I'll talk about that and explain what that is. As you know, under the current school finance laws, the maximum maintenance and operations tax rate that we are able to levy without a tax ratification election is 4 cents above our compressed rate of $1 plus 4 cents for $1.04. So we are at the maximum on our M&O rate without holding a tax ratification election. If you adopt a rate in excess of $1.04, then we would have to hold a tax ratification election. However, the Texas Tax Code Section 2608 provides an exception to this TRE requirement when a district is negatively impacted by a natural disaster such as a hurricane, a tornado, flooding, and et cetera, and the governor has requested federal financial aid in connection with that disaster. And so the exception to the TRA requirement is for the tax year immediately following the disaster. And also we may increase our M&O tax rate to a rate above $1.04 without holding a TRE by implementing the provisions of Tax Code Section 2608. So the exception of the TRE requirement is, again, it's for 1 year. It's in the tax year immediately following the disaster. So in order to take advantage of the additional state revenue by the use of 2 additional pennies in Tier 2 guaranteed yield enrichment level and the 2 additional pennies for tax purposes, we are recommending that we increase our M&O tax rate by 2 cents and reducing our INS rate by 2 cents, resulting in no increase to our taxpayers, but that maneuver will provide $28 million to our operating budget. The first 6 pennies in Tier 2 are paid at $106.28 per penny per weighted student, whereas all of the other 11 pennies that are available to us in that range of up to the maximum of $1.17 tax rate. The other 11 pennies above that first 6 pennies are paid at $31.95 per penny per student. So you can see that there is a huge benefit to us in that additional 2 cents. So this slide shows that in the top the top 3 rows, our current tax rate of $1.04, our M&O tax rate of $1.04 would provide state revenue of $313.3 million and tax revenue of $515.7 million. And then our current INS tax rate of 40 cents would provide tax revenue of $198.3 million. We do not receive any state revenue on the debt side. And in the middle three rows, you can see that if we increase our M&O rate to $1.06, that additional 2 cents, that would bring in state revenue of $331.6 million. And if you drop down to the last 3 rows, that additional 2 cents provides $18.2 million of state revenue. That 2 cents, additional 2 cents of our M&O at $1.06 would provide tax revenue of $525.6 million, which is $9.9 million more than what we would have received with a $1.04 M&O tax rate. You following me with that? I'm losing my voice. And then the 2 cent reduction in the INS rate then would cause a $9.9 million decline or less tax revenue that we would need to fund in another way. So the total revenue column at the end, at the total revenue that you see on the far right is that 2 cents when you add the $18.2 million of state revenue and the $9.9 million of tax revenue provides an additional $28 million of operating revenues that we can help fund our budget. The INS revenue, the INS loss of revenue of $9.9 million nets out, the total nets out to $18.2 million. We would transfer out of our general operating fund balance enough money, $9.9 billion, over to the debt service fund to be able to pick up and that loss of tax revenue in the debt, on the debt side. Before I go any further, do you have any questions about that? Because I know it's a little confusing.
This would be a one-time windfall, though, correct?
That's a one-time windfall, that's correct, yeah. So the next slide shows the difference in our budget deficit if we do a 2-cent tax swap and if we don't. So on the in the middle column, you see that without the tax swap, our revenue is $891 million. Our expenditures are $930.9 million, resulting in a budget deficit of $39.8 million. With the tax swap, we have the revenue of $891 million. The additional revenue resulting from those 2 cents of $28 million provides total operating revenues of $919 million, offset by the $931 million of expenditures. So bringing our budget deficit down from $39.8 million to $11.6 million. And then I'm showing there the transfer then to the debt service fund from the general operating fund balance of $9.9 billion. So the net effect on our fund balance, our general fund balance, the net effect is $21.5 million as opposed to $39.8 million. So with that concludes my presentation, and our plan then is to bring the final proposed budget to you for your consideration at the June 14th regular board meeting. So with that, I would be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. Tom?
I know you'll be surprised, but I have a number of questions. I'm also mindful of the fact the game starts at 8 o'clock. And so, Dr. Henry, if we go past that, can you get the game up there?
Yeah, we can, I bet.
Okay, taking a look at these, you mentioned that we're cutting $21 million out of our current expenditures, which will be partially an impact on attrition, elimination of positions, and potential reduction or elimination of programs. First question, are any of our coveted programs that we're so very proud of, are they on the chopping block, like Camp Summit?
No, sir.
Or Algebra Camp?
None of our programs are on the chopping block. These are all departmental cuts that we can make that will have no impact on our instructional arrangements. That's good.
So I appreciate that. I would beg to differ. I think as lean as this district is, all cuts hurt. It may take time for the pain to show up, but eventually all cuts have an impact. But I'm pleased to hear that we aren't cutting any of our programs that have been so successful. But I remain concerned. When I was on the CLC, I had to recommend 20% worth of cuts. And I think we did, in fact, see student attainment suffer as a result. Secondly, you mentioned that insurance is going up, but within the plan itself, I don't see any dollars set aside to help offset the insurance other than the salary increase. Is that correct?
Oh, you're talking about the health insurance?
Yes,
That's
sir.
correct. That's correct. Mm-hmm.
We
have currently, I have the figures in front of me here I can pull out, but roughly 8,500 of our employees, total employees of about 15,500 are participants in our health insurance plan. So about 55% of our employees are covered under our TRS active care health plan.
There is a corollary follow-up question to that. I won't ask it right now because my colleague Debbie Blackshear typically asks that, and I'll let her ask that later if she's so inclined. Rolling forward, and I have a flashback and then an observation of what I saw in writing, and then I have a follow-up question. And this has to do with the changing percentages of state funding, total funding, as well as local funding. So the flashback, years ago when I was a private citizen, and armed with your analysis and your numbers, I was in Austin chatting with one of our elected officials, and I was using the numbers that you had provided. And the elected official chose to differ and suggest the numbers were wrong. And so he and I got nose to nose, and we were considering our next option since logic clearly was not working when you intervened and very politely identified why your numbers happened to be superior at that particular point in time. That's the flashback. You may or may not recall that. Nothing exciting happened that day, maybe because you were standing behind me. A noted state senator who is strongly opposed to pre-K has said that total state funding has increased and basically inferred that school districts were whining about the funding. A friend of the district, no, I would say upon occasion he's been a good friend of the district, has recently put out in writing saying that state funding has as a percentage has actually gone up, which would say our audited numbers are incorrect. So I would ask you to comment a little bit on some of the information that's out there in public. Not everybody can be right. I suspect strongly that our friends' numbers are arithmetically correct, but I don't know that the interpretation is necessarily so, but you're more conversant with the numbers than I am, so I'll let you address that.
Well, if we go back to the slide, let's see, which slide would that be the best to depict that? The third slide showing the decline in state revenue. And as you alluded, you've heard legislators say that they are appropriating more dollars each year. One more. Nope. Yes, there you go. That legislators are saying that they are appropriating more dollars each year to fund public education. Well, this slide and the previous two slides are validating our contention that the amount of state revenue used in the foundation school program provided for school district operations is declining each year, not increasing each year. And so I think that, and I can provide a slide at the next meeting to show kind of a reconciliation of what the numbers that are being used by legislators and according to the state budget. But primarily what they're talking about is that for total revenue provided for Article 3, which is all of education, which includes higher ed, public ed, and some other programs such as TRS, higher ed, retirement plan, the TRS Active Care. Some of those programs are included in the amounts that they're talking about rather than what is used for school districts in their daily operations, which is from the foundation school program. So, you know, I anticipated that you might have a question about that, but Article 3 revenue, general revenue, represents $56.4 billion in the state budget, which is 52% of the total general revenue in the state budget of $106 billion. And that's where that 52% I think you're referring to, that Senator Patrick is talking about, that they're providing 52% of the state budget for education. Well, that general
And-
revenue, if...
And pardon me, sir, I think that's Lieutenant Governor Patrick now.
I'm sorry, what did I say? Senator?
Senator, yes, sir.
Sorry. Correction noted. But that, again, that Article 3 represents all of the other educational agencies that are in the state budget, and not just the Foundation School Program. If you look at the Foundation School Program, which is the amount of money provided to school districts to fund their daily operations, it represents, and that amount is $41.6 billion. And it represents 39% of general revenue, not 52%, but 39%. But it only represents 19% of the total state budget of roughly $217 billion. So, and that also includes, there's some federal funding that is included in those numbers that are being spoken of by legislators. There are other funds, other revenues that are included in that. Competitive grants are included in those numbers. So when you parse out all of the, take all of that extraneous programs out that we do not use for daily operations in the Foundation School Program, it brings us down to 39% of the general revenue budget.
So once again, your numbers have the highest degree of accuracy and understanding and relevance.
I'm just taking what the state budget provides. I have access to that. I've downloaded the state budget and I've looked at that and analyzed it, and those are just the state's numbers.
Another question, so I can try and get this in my mind. On the 2-cent tax rate swap, are we grabbing what we typically talk of as golden pennies?
That's correct. Yeah, they're golden because they provide a much greater amount per student per penny than any other pennies.
So how many golden pennies do we have available to us?
We have 2 more. So
A total of 4?
There's a total of 6.
Total of 6.
So we are benefiting by 4 right now, and we are allowed to access those other 2 pennies. In a normal year, we would only be able to access those through a tax ratification election. So we can do that now this year in that 1-year TRE without a TRE. So.
When Representative Dan Huberty was first elected, part of his campaigning, and also what he repeated after he was elected, was that school districts should, quote, use their rainy day fund. But there's a difference between the state rainy day fund and our reserves, right? The state rainy day fund is constantly replenished, but we don't have an outside replenishment for our reserves. Is that correct?
That's correct. The only way that we can increase our rainy day fund or our fund balance is if our expenditures are less than our revenues every year.
You mentioned in here about eliminating the 20% local optional homestead exemption, which of course by law we cannot do. There's a constitutional amendment forbidding that. John, unless there is strong board objection, as of tonight, I am formally requesting Marnie to draw up a resolution for us to consider and vote on by a board, requesting our state senator, Paul Bettencourt, to draw up legislation that would remove the penalty associated with districts that have granted the optional homestead exemption, and remove that penalty for as long as the constitutional amendment is in place. And before I go further on that, let me re-verify with Stuart that we are still penalized the state still acts when they allocate money as if we have full access to that property value, when in fact, we are forbidden by the Constitution to access that property value. Is that correct?
That's correct. The way that works is the state comptroller values our property, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And when they do that, they disregard any of the optional homestead exemptions that districts have. So that amount, the value that they assign us, does not take into account or reduce our values because of the optional homestead exemption. And because of that amount is greater, because they do not reduce those values because of the homestead exemption, that directly reduces our state revenue that we receive from the state.
And John, the reason why I mentioned Senator Betancourt is that he was the leading proponent to put that constitutional amendment in place. So I would think it's appropriate for him to take the lead, but certainly I would expect the House members of our legislative delegation that perhaps the resolution should request them to introduce the legislation in the House as well, although I'm not conversant which house, which body the proper placement of that bill should be in, because they each have different responsibilities.
When I testified before the Commission on School Finance, I also brought forth to them recommendations that they could make to improve school finance, and one of those recommendations was to give us full value for that optional homestead exemption in the assignment of the comptroller's values.
And Stuart, what difference, what is the monetary difference do you estimate that it would help us in that regard to our budgets?
Well, in terms of the difference in state revenue
if this was
tax
done
revenue.
away with, this penalty.
Well, that value, the value that we leave on the table, so to speak, because of the homestead exemption is over $5.2 billion. If we were to be able to, I don't have the figure in front of me or on the top of my head, on a tax basis, on a tax revenue basis, if we repealed that locally, if we were able to do that, would provide us about $55 million of operating revenues, just in tax revenue alone. So I suspect that coupled with the state revenue, if we were able to repeal that, then I would, it's hard for me to guess off the top of my head how much that would be, but it's a lot of money.
Or would you, I want to make sure that our listening audience fully understands what you're talking about. We're not talking about repealing the homestead exemption, aren't we? We're not talking about that. We're talking about not being penalized for having it, right?
Right.
Okay, I want to make sure that that's.
Right. So I can have that figure for the next meeting if you like. I can put my calculator to work and figure out what additional state revenue that would provide us if we were able to do that.
No, I was going to say, I'm glad you said that, John, and to make sure that someone didn't think Tom was suggesting we take away the optional homestead exemption. But I like what Tom is saying, because for years, our representatives in Austin were saying, "Oh, y'all have the optional homestead exemption. You have the ability to take that away." And now they've gone and taken away the ability for us to take that away, but still penalize us. So I think what Tom is saying, and let me just confirm this, is that we just want that penalty removed.
Correct. The penalty removed. And even TASB supported the penalty being in place because TASB has always supported, quote, paying your fair share. And so the TASB concept of paying your fair share is anybody who granted the optional homestead exemption was not paying their fair share.
Correct.
But I would hope that TASB would drop that support, since there's a constitutional amendment forbidding. So you can't take it away. So even under the TASB guidelines, at least when I served on TASB, and I haven't served for a long time now, we are paying our full share as permitted by law.
I'll look at the the financial impact of state revenue that we would receive if they did count that, and then reduce our assigned values by that amount to see what that would result in state revenue, and let you know.
And I don't know about the timing for the agenda. I'll let Marnie advise us. But I would ask John for you to consider also directing Marnie to perhaps draw up a resolution of some form that we could vote on, say, by our next meeting. I don't know if the board's prepared to move that quickly.
We'll talk with Marnie about that.
Unfortunately, we don't have 72 hours. That's the downfall of doing a Monday-Thursday split. When we do Thursday-Monday, we get an extra day, so it would have to either be a special called or the June meeting, because the post.
Well, what we're proposing, it can't even be considered until the next legislative session,
The June meeting.
so we can do it in June.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that might give Stuart time to pull together numbers.
And that'd be great timing too, because that's when you'll be approving the budget.
Right.
So,
John, I know I'm wearing everybody out, but can I ask a few more
Okay,
questions?
Go ahead.
Thanks.
But before you
Yes,
do
sir.
though, anyone else have any questions, so you can get your questions in, and then we'll come back to Tom. Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
You know, when we talk about the increased funding, I want to make certain that I fully understand the funding that you're asking us to consider as part of the tax swap, which will bring some money in and reduce the deficit, but not reduce it completely. These are general coffer funds, correct?
That's correct.
So we aren't going to allocate these funds, Mark, say, just to those students who say they want to go to a four-year college. This can be money for our special ed kids, our kids that going into the military, those who want to pursue 2 years trade school or 4-year.
yeah, we have a philosophy that we believe in public education and opportunity for all students, no matter what their ability level, so we don't discriminate and not allow kids to go to school or be funded if they don't commit to a four-year college, like some charter schools do.
So it's not differential funding, and
Right.
we aren't skimming.
Exactly.
Thank you. Stuart, I don't know, do we have any of our financial advisors in the house tonight?
No, sir, not yet. Mr. Palmer will be here for an agenda item related to our remarketing of some bonds.
I do have a question. I'll go ahead and ask it now, if we can go back to it. The question for our financial consultants is, will the tax swap you're talking about have a deleterious impact on either our credit rating or on, oh, Don, you too, you know what that word means. Do not do that.
Go ahead, Tom, please.
Just trying to spell it over.
So will it have a negative impact on our credit rating or our ability to repay future bonded indebtedness? And then the second question,
I can answer that if you trust my answer, but yeah, I'm sure you want to hear from the financial advisor. But
well, I do want to hear it from the financial advisor, because he is the keeper of that hen house. And we are reaching our hand into the hen house, and you're telling us we're putting it back, but I want him to confirm everything.
Well, I'm the keeper of the hen house. He's just advising us in that regard.
He is an observer as to what goes on in the hen house. Okay. And then the second part, we could direct you for the 9.9 million. We could, in fact, authorize you to restrict those reserves for future payment and then transfer the cash to satisfy the restriction of those reserves at some date in the future. Am I not correct?
That's correct, but we will need that $9.9 million to pay the principal and interest this next year. So
So we do not have reserves built up on that, in that budget, rather
Well-
in that fund?
well, in that fund, in the debt service fund, we do have reserves built up, and I'm planning to use a certain amount of reserves to help add to the $9 million that we're sending over there from the fund balance.
Very good, thank you, sir. John, thank you for your forbearance.
Thank you. Any other questions? Debbie, did you have?
I just want to restate with you, Stuart, to make sure, so that anyone that's listening tonight, concerns may be put to rest about this. But as I understand what you told us tonight about the rate swap, there will be no financial burden, no increase in taxes to our taxpayers, many of which have already had a tough year.
That's correct.
Okay.
No
there-
increase, no change in the tax rate, total
Okay,
tax
I
rate.
just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
And in fact, Debbie, I would even add to what, this plan is I think it brings more state dollars back to our taxpayers. So it's actually assisting our local taxpayers. And we had a lot of conversations at the leadership level about this. And, we're worried about budget deficits, but we think we have it. We've really done a great job in the last 7-8 years of building up our fund balance to prepare for these difficult days. But this has been a tough year, and one of the things that we all were concerned about were our employees, and during a very, very difficult year, not providing some type of increase in salary. So we feel very confident with the budget, and as I think you've experienced, Stuart and his team, along with the rest of our district, we do a great job managing the budget, and we're going to be in good shape come this time next year.
Oh, absolutely. And, I guess the sad part is that our legislators in Austin saw fit to reduce funding in education at a time when many of our people are suffering. Thank you.
Let me just add one thing regarding the tax swap. There are other school districts in the area that are following our lead and also proposing a similar swap of their tax rate. So we would not be the only ones in the area that do this.
Makes sense.
Christine?
Okay, and thank you. I was going to ask our other districts taking advantage of this situation. This is a question I ask, I think, every year when we talk about the budget. But since we are talking about an effect on our fund balance, what are we required to have in our fund balance? Our percentage?
Well, we're not required
Or suggested
per
of
se,
having.
but prudent financial management dictates that we have 2 to 3 months of fund balance. We have currently 6 months or 50% of our operating expenditures in our cash reserves. So we are very strong. We have a very robust fund balance, and in fact, the rating agencies, the rate that gives us our credit rating when we sell bonds, make mention of that in their report every year. So we feel very good about that.
That's how I remembered it.
And as Dr. Henry mentioned, we have systematically over the years tried to increase that fund balance in order to weather a future storm that we saw coming. So now we're kind of here, and we're going to be using it.
Literally and figuratively.
Just one other comment.
Literally and figuratively, yes.
One other comment also is, we're hopeful, fingers crossed, that the legislature will do something in 19 to where we're not making very difficult decisions in 1920. So, fingers crossed.
We'll see. Yes, Don.
Stuart, I know that we've got, you said roughly 55% of our employees on TRS Active Care. And looking at a 3% increase in salaries, how does that correlate to the the employee out there as far as the increase in the TRS active care premiums?
Let me just give you some numbers here. We have 8,579 members participating in the plan. 15,439 employees that are eligible for benefits in the plan. So 55% of our employees are participating in our health plan. 65% of those employees, or 5,600 of them, are in Active Care 1 HD, which is the high deductible plan. And the reason I want to segregate that out is because the increase in that plan is much less than the increase in the other plans, Active Care 2 and Active Care Select. So 44% of the total number of our employees that are participating in the plan are employee only. And the employee only increase is $16 a month or $192 a year, compared with, and again, I go back to the teacher salary increase that we're proposing, an average increase of $2,020 a year. So compare that with 192, well above, well covers that increase. Our paraprofessionals and our hourly employees, I think the annual increase there is about $800. And let's see, I have that. Oh, the 3% raise on the average paraprofessional salary and hourly employee is about $800. So again, well above that $192 annual increase in the premiums.
Did TRS Active Care change on that high deductible plan, the maximum out-of-pocket exposure to the employee?
They increased the deductible by $250, if I recall. The maximum out-of-pocket, I would have to get back with you.
Well, no, it might be just the amount of the deductible increase. That's what that would be. And I think I can answer this since it's in the budget presentation. A lot of what we hear is that TRS blows the plan. I mean, that's basically it. But we're stuck with that plan. No, we can't get out of it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Is that an insurance term? I'm not.
Yeah, what was that word?
Stuck?
Blows? Does that mean not good?
As a new teacher who had to read over those benefits that were offered to me, yeah.
It's very similar to deleterious.
You can't even say it. You don't have to Google blows, though.
That's Jason's deletory.
All right, Bob, save us, Bob, save us.
Yeah, really. Get off that subject quick. Okay, with you and Dr. Henry testifying as you did, and I know, Stuart, that you have seen a couple of or at least maybe 2 or 3 of the proposed new formulas for funding education. When you look at those, do you see anything that we should be concerned about in our district? Or do you think it's going to be a pretty even situation? Or do you see anything that's going to be advantageous to us?
Well, Mr. Covey, I'm not really hopeful that a new plan will emerge in the session. So, I've seen plans that have been proposed by the Texas Association of School Boards. I've seen plans that have been proposed by the Equity Center, the Texas School Alliance, of which we're a member. We've proposed plans. But the fact of the matter is, none of those plans will provide us with any benefit unless there's additional money put into public education. So I know the commission is required to write a report on their findings. They're still holding hearings. They're receiving a lot of information. But again, if the state doesn't have the money to fund it, then I seriously doubt that there will be a new plan.
Stuart, looking at the suggestion from Tom, how many of our districts across the state have that, the homestead?
The optional
exemption?
homestead?
Yes, optional.
About 200. Most of those districts are, well, we have quite a few in the Gulf Coast area. Houston has an optional homestead exemption. I think Spring Branch does. Pearland. So there are quite a few in this area that have them, but about 200 statewide.
Okay. All right. All right, can we move on?
John, one follow-up?
Okay.
Stuart, one follow-up question, and this has always been Debbie's question, but since she opted not to ask it tonight, I'll go ahead and ask it. When we, and Don touched on it, but when we look at the net take-home pay for our teachers at each of the levels, and if we make comparisons between our district and other districts, that number that ought to be compared is for one employee for the high deductible, because that's the most relevant one, because we can't look at a full family and compare that across districts. It's got to be that one number.
I would say that that's true, although it is so difficult to compare one plan with another plan. Plans that are in TRS under the state plan, comparing with a self-funded plan. Self-funded plan, the district has the option or the opportunity to change their plan design, change their deductibles to meet their financial goals, to increase or reduce their premiums. They have a lot more flexibility. We don't have any flexibility at all with regard to our plan design under TRS. And even if in a fully insured plan, those plans may have totally different plan designs. So it's very, very difficult, to compare plans across the board.
So any comparisons from one district to another, and I know I see them, and I suspect everybody on the board sees it from time to time from teachers or teacher groups. We need to keep in mind that we should be trying to look at as close as we can, apples to apples.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Stuart. And the action items, the consensus portion of our action item agenda 5A, the board will consider approving tax refunds of $500 or greater for Cypress-Fairbanks ISD. 5B, the board will consider approving the minutes of the April 12th, 2018 special call meeting. 5C, the board will consider approving the minutes of the April 16, 2018 regular meeting. We'll now move to the action items, non-consensus agenda. Item 6A, the board will consider awarding bids and contracts and or authorizing purchase orders as recommended in the posted agenda item. They are 1, ambulance and EMT services for athletic games and other district events. 2, building materials and general MRO, maintenance, repair, operation supplies. 3, food production chiller replacement. 4, Hopper Middle School gym floors replacement. 6, property insurance. Do we have any questions, or can we move this to consensus? Yes, Tom.
And I guess I'm on. I don't see Matt out in the audience. Oh, there he is. A quick question for you, Matt, as it relates to the insurance. Karen's got it. Very good. Regarding the proposal that we received from the incumbent insurance company, McGriff, Sybils, and Williams, it represents roughly a $500,000 premium increase. And of the 3 proposals that we received, It is the highest of the three, and there is information in the board book, but if you would briefly explain why you're recommending this insurance proposal.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Jackson, what you're actually looking at that was in the board packet actually shows McGriff what it currently is, what our rate is, and then two proposals by McGriff. We actually originally had 5 different proposals that we thought we would be getting in, but several of them pulled out and did not submit a proposal. And then we also had some proposals submitted that did not meet our requirements. Our specific requirements were that they had to have bid at least a minimum of $25 million in property insurance. We wanted 50 because that's what we currently have, and then we'd have an excess of another 200 million. But 2 of the proposals did not meet the requirement of a proposal for 25 million. It was less. So what you're seeing in front of you is just 2 proposals by McGriff. And what they are is one that's identical to what we have now, kind of the same terms, and the increases in that particular one related to just adding additional property that we've added since the previous year, plus going up because of Hurricane Harvey. The proposal we're recommending that we wanted to look at because of Hurricane Harvey is increasing our flood zone A insurance, which is our properties that are in the 100-year flood zone. And we have 7 properties in that flood zone, one of which is more. And so because of that, we are recommending going from a $5 million flood zone A amount to 15 million, so increasing it by 10 million. As you know, the Moore loss exceeded 10 million, so we wanted to be sure that we had, or exceeded 5, but that 10 million would help offset that difference. So we're recommending for those properties in flood zone A to increase that coverage. The other item in here is, which is minimal, is we did add terrorism coverage. And that was recommended by our property insurance consultant because of what happened in Austin. And they thought it was a good idea to have some type of terrorism coverage, which we've never taken in the past.
Thank you.
Okay.
Karen, as I recall, the increase of the coverage was 17%, whereas we were expecting about a 25% increase. Is that correct?
That's correct. We were very pleased, and that 17% increase includes that additional coverage.
Okay.
Another thing to note, too, which actually didn't cost us any money, but we were able to negotiate a named storm maximum deductible. It used to be a 3% dollar amount, which was actually close to $86 million. And we were able to negotiate that down to 10 million maximum. So that's really nice too.
Good job.
Anyone else? A great job getting us maximum coverage, and also we beat the expected increase, so great job. Anyone else? Can we move this to a consensus?
Well, I do have a follow-up.
Oh, okay. Well,
On item 1, on the ambulance and EMT services, and I see Matt coming up, so I'll address the question. And this is tangential to what's on the agenda. So we have the contract for EMS and ambulance service. Do we have defibrillators? I didn't say that right. You can help me out with the Don. Do we have those available?
Yes, sir. We have them at all the athletic fields and all the athletic facilities.
And so those will be present for all games, whether it's football field or basketball games?
Yes, sir.
As a follow-up on that, when I was at my alma mater's Chancellor Council meeting, a noted cardiologist in the area of athletics indicated that the gold standard for schools in the state of Texas that very few districts rose to actually required an EKG of incoming freshmen, i.e. an EKG at the 8th grade level. Where do we stand on that for our district?
And Teresa can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe for all incoming high school students for athletics, band, and drill team, we require an EKG. Optional?
We make it available.
It's available.
So we make it available. That is significant, but once again, that's an indication of why this district is so excellent. So thank you.
All right,
Well,
Bob?
then just to point out, to follow up what Tom said, we make it available at no cost to the parents and the students. I mean, it's at our cost, so that's huge.
Yes, I mean, it is dramatic, because you're talking about saving lives.
Bob?
Matt, I'm sorry you walked all the way back and sat down, so,
Just shout out the answer, Matt.
yeah, you can
Okay,
shout out your
come
answer.
on.
He needs to
I,
He needs to walk.
I certainly understand needing to have the ambulance services and at the Berry and the Pridgeon, but what do we do about JV games, and what do we do about the other games? Do we furnish something like that at those games also?
You know, I didn't need to walk up here. I'm going to defer that to Ms. Hall.
Okay, but don't sit down too quick. No, I'm just kidding.
Mr. Kobe, we do provide medical services for those events as well. We have either nurses that cover those events or ambulance service, but we always have some type of coverage. JV football games, we have the benefit of having the high school athletic trainers. They kind of are able to cover a lot of those events, but middle school events are covered by ambulance service or nurses for extra duty.
All right, thank you.
All right, may we move this to consensus? All right. 6B, the board will consider nominations for the large district member position on the TASB Board of Directors for Region 4, Position F. And of course, this is the term of Bob, and I think
I think Bob's done great.
he's done a,
Super job. He
Yes.
should probably keep going with it.
yes.
Just my opinion. Anybody, unless somebody wants to jump in there, Bob, you're our man. Unbelievable what you've done.
Bob's the man. All right, we move that to consensus. 6C, the board will consider the adoption of an order authorizing the conversion of the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District variable rate unlimited tax school building bonds, Series 2015-B1, 2015-B2, and 2017-A1 to a new rate period, authorizing the preparation of a remarketing memorandum and enacting other provisions relating thereto.
President Ogletree, I would ask that if we could, to delay this for a little bit later in the meeting. Our financial advisor, Mr. Palmer, is on his way here, caught in traffic. He's coming from another board meeting, but he's been caught in traffic and he's not here yet.
Okay. Yes, and did you just Stuart, if he can get here before 8? Yeah.
He'll be here before. If he's not here in time to get back to the game, we'll go ahead with that item, so.
Let's look at 6D. The board will consider approving the budget amendments for the period of January 1, 2018 through March 31, 2018. These amendments you see listed there represent changes in the revenues and expenditures and its normal operating procedures. Can we move this to consensus? Okay, all right. 6E, the board will consider approving the advanced courses for 2018-2019. Any questions on that? None?
Well, as long as we have a little bit of downtime waiting on Mr. Palmer, we extra grade point for that fourth year, and we don't.
Any questions of Linda? She's just dying to have some questions tonight. Look at her. Oh, all right, can we move that to consensus? 6H, the board will consider approving a resolution to suspend portions of the FMH local for the 2017-2018 and 2018-2019 school years. This is a suspension that requires students to meet all credits and state texting requirements in order to participate in the graduation ceremony. You good? Everybody's good? All right. That's consensus also. 6I, the board will consider approving a request for a TEA waiver that allows the district to train staff on various educational strategies designed to improve student performance in lieu of student instruction for the 2018-2019 school year. Any questions of Dr. Macias? Anyone? All right, we'll move to 6J. Consensus. 6J, the board will consider approving on first reading additions, revisions, or deletions to district policies, DEC local compensation and benefits, leaves and absences. This is a revision. Can we move that to consensus? And 6K, the board will consider approving on second reading additions, revisions, or deletions to district policies, BBB, local, board members' elections, to FFF, local, student welfare, student safety. By the way, that one is a revision. This one is an addition on FFF. Any questions? We move that to consensus? Yes, okay. 6L, the board will consider approving construction proposals and contracts paid from the 2014 bond funds to the recommended contractors and authorize the superintendent or designee to execute all necessary documents related to such contracts as follows. The first one is the 2018 Anthony Middle School renovations. And number 2 is the 2018 Cypress-Fairbanks High School Annex Paving Improvement Package.
Just FYI, that Anthony, that's the middle school track, you know, that, what did we say, Roy, that's our 4th or 5th? That's our fourth middle school track, on our way to doing all 18.
Yes, sir.
And the Cyfair, any questions on the Cyfair paving improvement? We got that. All right, that's moved to consensus. 6M, the board will consider approving and authorizing the superintendent or designee to enter into miscellaneous professional service contracts related to the following projects. And one is the Cyfair Annex and school and high school annex and paving improvement package, and 2, 2017 Alton Hancock Elementary School addition and renovations. 3, 2017 renovations to Bang, Emmett, Hamilton Elementary Schools. 4, renovations to Owens, 2017 renovations to Owens, Reed, and Metcalf Elementary Schools. 5, 2017 Langham Creek High School renovations. 6, 2017 Cook and Truett Middle School renovations. 7, 2017 Thornton Middle School renovations. Any questions, or can we move that to consensus also? All right. 6N, the board will consider the use of job order contracting as the delivery method for construction proposals and contracts paid from bond funds to the recommended contract and authorize the superintendent designee or designee to execute all necessary documents related to such contract as follows, and that's 2018 Hopper Middle School gym waterproofing and water intrusion repairs. Can we move that to consensus? 6O, the board will consider approving a request for an amendment to the turn lane easement agreement granted to Harris County in May 2017 for a temporary construction easement, and authorize the superintendent or designee to negotiate the final terms and execute all related documents.
Hey, just a comment, John.
Yes.
This is awesome. If you've ever driven by Sioux Falls, at any time of the day at Tuckerton there, this is huge. Dylan, great job where we are.
And that's consensus, right? Okay. I guess,
C.
we're back to C.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ogletree. I'm having trouble with my voice tonight. In November 2015, we sold $352,790,000 of bonds, of which $143,745,000 were variable rate Series 2015B. The variable rate portion was sold in 3 different tranches with 1-year, 3-year, and 4-year term dates of August 15th, 2016, 2018, and 2019. And they were styled 2015 B1 for $49,740,000, Series 2015 B2 in the amount of $48,015,000, and 2015 B3 in the amount of $45,990,000. In May of 2016, the 2015 B1 bonds were remarketed to a new rate period of 2 years, ending August 15th, 2018. So the 2015 B series bonds, the rate period for the B1 and the B2 bonds terminates this year on August 15th, 2018. In addition to that, in November 2017, we sold $187.5 million in variable rate bonds, and also in 3 different tranches, each tranche in the amount of $62,500,000 with 1-year, 2-year, and 3-year term dates of August 15, 2018, 2019, and 2020, respectively, styled 2017 A1, A2, A3, respectively. The rate period for the 2017 A1 bonds terminates this year in August, on August 15, 2018. So I'm going to try to summarize that. We are asking you to consider adopting an order authorizing the conversion of the 2015 B1 in the amount of $49,740,000 and the B2 bonds in the amount of $48,015,000, and a separate order for the 2017 A1 bonds in the amount of $62,500,000 to new rate periods of 3 years in duration, ending August 15, 2020. So the bond order also approves the preparation of a remarketing memorandum and confirms the appointment of J.P. Morgan Securities as the remarketing agent. We will be setting the new rate during the first couple of weeks of August, with closing on the transaction of August 15th. Our co-bond counsel, Jonathan Frells with Bracewell and Randy Bates with Bates and Coleman, are here tonight, and Terrell Palmer, our financial advisor, are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Palmer, I know it took you You've had a busy night, but since you're here, why don't you tell us why we should approve it?
Sure. Good to see you all again. Yes, this is mainly regarding your variable rate program, and we have about $450 million in variable rate. And unlike your fixed rate bonds, where we sell fixed rate bonds and we don't even think about them for 10 years until we get to be able to refund them, this requires kind of some annual maintenance, where we always are going to have to remarket these bonds on an annual basis. The benefit of that effort that we have with variable rate bonds is we're able to really get the interest rates as low as possible. We're expecting that this remarketing will have an interest rate of, and this is 3 years out, but we'll have an interest rate of less than 2.5%. And so it's a very good rate, and certainly worth the trouble from your staff as well as your professionals involved in the transaction. So we think it's an excellent program, and it's worked well for you for years, and we see no need to change.
Any questions, Tom?
I realize that we are riding this horse, and we will continue to do so, but it's always good to look back on a decision like this. Does it still appear to be that we made a good financial decision on behalf of the district when you take into account the rolling interest rate, but also there are certain reissuance costs associated that really become part of that interest rate, whether
Sure.
we call it interest or not? It is a real cost.
Absolutely, and we focus on those issuance costs. When we're having, we know that this isn't a long-term deal that we can put away for 10 years. There is going to be some recurring fees, and we want to make it reasonable for you. So $160 million transaction, my fee is probably 20% of what a normal fixed rated fee of $160 million transaction. I believe all of the other professionals are working for some fraction of what it would be for a fixed rate issue. And so we're trying to make sure that is economic for the district, because we think it's an excellent tool. It's not only, and a lot like your investment policy, where the yield is the lowest goal of the 5 goals. What we really enjoy about the variable rate program is the way we're able to call bonds when we have surplus funds available, and to keep the tax rate at a stable amount instead of the tax rate bouncing up and down. That's going to be even more important now with the latest tax code change, which is now eliminates the ability to do advanced refundings. And so this is going to be your best tool to try to maintain your tax rate and to pay bonds off to create capacity for future bond elections. And so we think it's a valuable tool.
You anticipated my next question, but if you would, let's go back and have you give us a little more detail. You mentioned the tax code change, which does not permit advance refunding on tax-free bonds. What do you mean by that?
Okay, there are, in our industry, we used to have 2 different types of refundings. One would be a refunding in advance of the call date, and thus the term. The other refunding would be a current refunding, where we have to wait until we're within 90 days of that current call date. And so if we were issuing fixed rate bonds today, they may have a 7-year call. You couldn't call those bonds until the year 2025. But if interest rates, if we still had the ability to do an advance refunding, interest rates might go through the floor. And so we may look up in the year 2022, we used to be able to, and say, hey, this might be, we're at now historic lows in interest rates. This might be the best time to do an advance refunding of that call, of those bonds that are going to be callable in 2025. Let's not wait until 2025 to do those bonds. They've taken that away. in federal, you know, tax code, you know, there's always a yin and a yang, and that was one of the things that they took away when they lowered all of the tax rates on corporations and individuals across the United States.
Did I understand you correctly? You seem to infer that the soft puts permit a smoothing of interest rates and a bit of a smoothing of future cash payments to serve as bonded indebtedness. Did I understand you correctly?
I hope I said tax rates is what I meant. It smooths the tax rates and doesn't. You know, you have truth in taxation that you have to deal with, and you can only kind of levy an amount in your INS fund that is sufficient to pay for your obligations. And so, if your assessed value went up and you had a level debt service, it would almost force your tax rate to go down. With the variable rate program, we can then call in those bonds instead of remarketing them. We can call them in and use those surplus INS funds to create capacity in the future for different issues, for an additional bond election, and maintains a good, steady interest and sinking fund rate. That capacity is then available for that next election, and has worked very well in the past. I don't know if we're having our first bond sale for Spring Branch ISD tomorrow. They called an almost $900 million election, and with no tax increase, mainly because of the fact that they have been calling in so many bonds over the years that they had a great deal of capacity and were able to sell, or are going to be able to sell that $900 million, almost doubling their outstanding bonds without a tax increase. So it's an amazing tool, and one that I really embrace at the district.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Palmer, and we want to thank Mr. Frails and Mr. Bates also for their attendance tonight. We're at the conclusion of our agenda, and the superintendent's.
John, if I might, could I ask the question that I deferred, that I mentioned earlier? Thank you, sir. We were talking about, Stuart made his presentation on different options for us to consider, one of which is a tax swap option between operating revenues and funds allocated toward debt repayment. And so my question, and hopefully I can do this with a straight face, Don, will that tax swap have a deleterious effect upon our credit rating or our ability to repay bonded indebtedness on a going forth basis?
Yes, it will have a deleterious effect. It will be very positive for the district, and it's a tool that is being used currently by many districts that were affected by Hurricane Harvey. We have just gone through the rating process for Spring Branch with the issue for tomorrow, and they've already announced that they are going to do the tax rate swap, and it was very positively viewed by the rating agencies, and I think will be positively viewed by the bondholders. Katy ISD, who had suffered both issues with both Harvey and the tax day flood, had already implemented it last year. And so it was very positive for them, and so I think you're going to be one of many school districts in the Harvey path that are going to be taking advantage of this provision, and we see it as nothing but positive to the district.
Can we move 6C to consensus?
We can do it again.
All right. Then we are
Did you move that to consensus?
consensus. All right, we've concluded our agenda
At the
tonight.
Berry Center on Thursday.
Berry Center on Thursday night. Go Rockets.
I'll send you the PowerPoint.
You knew what I wanted.